benevolent skin cancer the sun brings from its reflection in the tropic seas were on his cheeks. The blotches ran well down the sides of his face, and his hands had the deep creased scars from handling heavy fish in the cords. But none of these scars were fresh. They were as old as erosions in a fishless desert. Everything about him was old, except his eyes, and they were the same color as the sea, and were cheerful and undefeated. "Santiago," the boy said to him as they climbed the bank from where the skiff was hauled up, "I could go with you again. We've made some money." The old man had taught the boy to fish, and the boy loved him. "No," the old man said. "You're with the lucky boat. Stay with them." "But remember how you went 87 days without fish, and then we caught big ones every day for 3 weeks?" "I remember," the old man said. "I know you did not leave me because you doubted. It was Papa made me leave. I am a boy, and I must obey him." "I know," the old man said. "It is quite normal." "He hasn't much faith." "No," the old man said. "But we have, haven't we?"
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies, and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com, and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
We're very excited to talk about today's book and movie. We started to get all into it, and we're like, oh no, we should be recording this.
It's brilliance.
Not our brilliance. The brilliance of Mr. Hemingway, Mr. Tracy, what's the name of the Howe? Is that his name?
James Wong Howe.
Yeah, who we just talked about. But anyway, before we get into all of that, welcome. We are so delighted to have you here. Yes, this is a podcast where we talk about movies that have been adapted from books, but actually, although we are talking about that this time around, because we do a brand new episode every single week, we will consider a movie that has been adapted from any literary source. So it could be a nonfiction book, it could be a magazine article, or a song, or a poem, or a play even. As long as it has a literary source, and as long as it is easy for people to get their eyes on, if it's streaming somewhere, and also we have to be able to get our hands on the source material. Those are really the only rules that we have. And we are constantly looking for suggestions. We have the holidays coming up, and pretty soon we're going to be at 10 years here.
I think it's our 9th December, like doing Christmas movies, holiday movies. Yes. So we've done them all.
We've done so many.
But we got a couple of good ones coming up for sure. Yes. But we are looking for suggestions.
Yeah, fortunately, like the holiday movies, it's one of those things that they just keep making. Mm-hmm. They never stop making them. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun December. But today's also going to be super fun. If you are maybe, you found us because you're a Hemingway fan, you found us because you're a Spencer Tracy fan, you have ideas for other Hemingway adaptations or Tracy movies you would like us to cover. There's a few places where you can make those suggestions. You can meet other listeners of this podcast and interact with us on the internet.
Yes, we do have a basic Facebook page. If you go to Facebook, you can like the page. The episodes are posted there, but we're much more interactive in our Facebook group, where Thaddeus was generous enough to put 2 main posts at the top of the page. One is a list of shows we've done, and one is a list of shows people have requested. You can just post your ideas there. That's a great place to do it. You just type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group and ask to join. We're on Twitter as long as that exists, at Book versus a Movie, but also Instagram and Threads. And I will get the Sky Blue or Blue Sky. I'm definitely going to try to get that together maybe over the holiday. We'll do that. We're on Instagram, Book versus Movie Podcast. All those places you can reach out to us. Or if you're old-fashioned like we are, we have an old-fashioned email. bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Send us your ideas. The thing is that the movie has to be streaming on a major app, and the book needs to be pretty easy for us to get our hands on, or the song or the poem or whatever it is. And if you would like some stickers, we have a stack of stickers here. We will drop them in the mail for you. So once again, just email us your address.
And I just put a Substack up for us.
Oh, yes, right.
So here's the deal. So it's Book versus Movie, all spelled out, bookversusmovie.substack.com. I'm going to try to do one after every episode, just like little kind of bonus material. It's it will be, I think this is the way I had it set up. And I'm new to Substack, so bear with me, everybody. It should be free. They're supposed to be free for 3 weeks, and then they go behind a paywall. So that's how it's going to work. And so you can go to Substack and subscribe and get, if you are interested in, little bonus tidbits that we sometimes overlook while we're doing the episode. And if you would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Yes, Patreon. We have 7 years worth of shows there. We've covered everything from The Silence of the Lambs to Saturday Night Fever to Agatha Christie, like everything you can think about. They're up on that Patreon wall. Actually, there's quite a few things there that are free from like our early days. So just go there and check it out and give it a listen. We want to thank everybody that signs up there. It really helps us we use the money for the books and the movies and just to put the show together. And if money is tight, we just ask that wherever you get your podcasts, if you could please make sure to subscribe. And if you could leave us a review, some stars, that would be amazing. Or if nothing else, just tell a friend about the show. It just helps us find our people.
So here in San Diego, Margot, it's starting to finally, and I just actually came from, I flew back from Sacramento yesterday, and I guess I didn't go to Sacramento this time last year because turns out Sacramento is beautiful in the autumn. I think it might be the prettiest time of year I've seen there so far. It's gorgeous. Like there's real leaves turning and it's blustery and it's beautiful. The capital is beautiful in the autumn. And here in San Diego, even it's storming. Like right now, it's raining. I'm wearing a very light cardigan. Like you can see through it. But that's like how it gets. This is autumn in San Diego. And so for here, it's like burr cold. So I really enjoyed this week's book and movie. I read the book on the plane. Going up, I think I didn't quite get through it all the way up, and I finished it on the way back. And how autumny is it in New York right now?
The leaves are changed. They're like yellow and orange, and they're dropping on the ground. And it's in the 50s. It's like crisp and sunny. It's my favorite time of year.
But I enjoyed having a little mental holiday in Cuba for this week's book and movie. I have always wanted to go to Cuba. And I think I might have mentioned this when we did The Killers a while back, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I had a very dear friend who's no longer with us. She actually hosted our wedding, and her father was the minister of tourism under the Batista regime, so pre-Castro government. And as a little girl, she knew Hemingway, and she used to give him Spanish lessons.
Oh my God.
At the local bar. She said he would sit her up on the bar and she would help him with his Spanish.
I love that.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
I just always wanted to see it's always going to be on my list until one of these days I'll make it happen. So I really enjoyed this, the book especially, and getting to travel there and escape the not very glamorous Southwest experience. I mean, I fly Southwest a lot. I am an A-list preferred passenger at this point, but it was fun to escape to Cuba for a little bit. So we're talking about Ernest Hemingway, who, as I just a second ago said, we talked about fairly recently when we did The Killers, which was the first movie adaptation of Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway's work. And but we'll go over some of the, look, he's a giant, if not the giant of American literature. Every time I read about Ernest Hemingway, I am, I feel like a tiny little ant.
He lived big. He lived large. Yes. So Ernest Miller Hemingway was born July 21st, 1899. He was a man, he's won the Pulitzer Prize for this story that we're talking about today, he's won the Nobel Prize. He's also notable for A Farewell to Arms, A Movable Feast, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place, all of these amazing stories. He served in World War I as an ambulance driver. He fell in love with a Red Cross nurse. She turned him down. I think he must have had PTSD, that was a very bloody war and a shocking war. When he was recuperating at home, he started writing. He was friends with people like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Gertrude Stein. He traveled to Paris. He wrote short stories and he wrote fiction, The Sun Also Rises. He also wrote with great clarity and spare. He was someone who made declarative statements. There's a lot of symbolism that we'll talk about today. He's also known for being someone who's an adventurer. He traveled around the world. He was a hunter. He went to Africa to hunt. He was somebody who bullfighting was one of his things he enjoyed. Skiing. He loved being by the water. He was living in Cuba when he was writing this particular story. And then Margo and I were talking off the air about the whole Castro of it all. He left Cuba and came back to America. He had a place in Florida. And I think there's like the Hemingway house where they have the cats. He was a big cat guy. But he died by suicide. And depression runs in his family, and there's a lot of members of the family that you could read about. But he's known more for his writing now, and he's one of those authors. I don't know, we didn't talk about this yet, but for me, he's somebody I read when I was young, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. He's somebody I really get as I get older. I really appreciate, and I think it's also this story especially is kind of. There's the one about the old man that the young waiter at a restaurant, and an old man comes in and he stays really late, and the young waiter is like really frustrated because he wants to go home. Mm-hmm. And the guy that owns the bar says, look, this is an old man. This is like, he just wants to be someplace safe. Like when I was younger, I had more patience for the waiter than I did for the patron. And now that I'm older, I'm like, I totally get that. I think also with all the bullfighting and stuff, when you think about the old man, the sea, it's like, oh, he's just killing a marlin. And you realize now, like, how much respect this character has for all life.
He really does. It's true. That did not occur to me at all when I read it I must have had to read it in school for something or other, I don't know if I read it in high school or if I read it in college. Old Man in the Sea in particular, if you're one of our listeners who's not in the United States, it's a book that students are often assigned, in particular of Hemingway's work. It's one that students get assigned as an example of, keeping it, like Margo said, like not being not overwriting, and showing, not telling, and symbolism. But yeah, you're right. I agree. I'm sort of the same way. And I've always liked Hemingway's work. But it hits different now for sure. Definitely. And he's just like, he was before, in the days, I was going to say before cinema, but not before cinema, because he's kind of concurrent with the evolution of cinema. But he is like an action hero. He is a real life action hero. He would, he was a journalist. He would purposefully throw himself into very, very dangerous, physically challenging situations. Very macho. He's 6 feet tall. He looks like a football player. I mean, he's very good looking.
Young Hemingway, look up in Google Images.
Whoa.
Wow.
Let me just have a little sip of my ice water here.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also this very sensitive writer, very, very sensitive to his characters always have an inner life that is much more complex than you would think at first glance. It's hard to explain without like reading passages of his, which we won't bore you with. But but Old Man in the Sea, when you look at kind of like the plot points of it, very little happens, actually. There's an old man. There's an old man. He used to be like the best fisherman in his village, and he's living in a pre-Castro Cuba. And he hasn't caught a fish in, what is it, like 85 days or something like that, right? And which is bad. It's very bad. Like,
because that's how he eats too, by the way.
He's pretty much just catching fish, like, so that he can continue to actually live. And so he goes out and, you know, he's just fishing, and he accidentally catches hold, or not accidentally, but surprisingly catches hold of a marlin. The marlin pulls him really far out to sea. He kills the marlin. Amazing. Like, if the story had ended there, if he'd gone back into the village, he would have been set for life, basically. Like, this is how big a catch this marlin is. It's bigger than his boat. Spoiler alert, we're going to spoil all of the points of the thing. But he's so far out at sea that, and marlin fishing is notoriously, I'm not a fisher person, but I do know that marlin fishing is like one of the hardest things that you can do. It's extremely physically demanding, notoriously difficult to do. And the old man, in spite of his age and the fact that he's by himself and the fact that he has almost no tech available to him, equipment really available to him, he does catch this marlin, and he ties it, after much fighting back and forth. A lot of the book is dedicated to the fight with the marlin, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But in terms of what happens, old man hasn't caught a fish in a long time, goes out into the ocean, catches the biggest fish ever. But before he can get back home and profit from the fish, sharks come and eat the whole fish. And so he comes back with nothing. The end. That's the story. He comes
back with the skeleton.
That's so sad.
It's so sad. And he's so poor that he sleeps on newspaper. Like, he's in this hut, a hovel. He has one friend, and the friend is a kid, and the kid used to hang out with him. He was like a mentor, and he wasn't bringing home fish. And his family's like, you got to go with another fisherman because we're all getting hungry here. So he's alone. He's not married. He doesn't have kids. He was married, I think, and then his wife passed away.
Yeah. There's a thing about he had a wife. It's so sad, y'all.
Yes.
He had a wife. She has passed away. He has a photo of her that he keeps hidden because he can't stand to. It makes him too sad to look at her. It's so sad.
I know. I was reading a bunch of sad things too, and then I read this. Yeah,
he's barely surviving, and he's really surviving partly because of this child. This child like just really idolizes him and really looks up to him, and also like the other people, the other members of that community, the fishing village community. Also, send him food, check on him and stuff like that. So, but he is very lonely, and he's not able to support himself, the way that he used to, mainly because of his age and dwindling resources that he has. But like, again, not that much happens. In the story, really.
It was first printed in Life magazine, and Life magazine was this giant tabloid style, magazines. Like, we've talked about this before. They used to weigh several pounds, especially certain times of the year, certain issues. But they were filled with literary things, and so this whole story was printed there in 1952, and. Yeah, like I said, I just recently saw Peggy Sue Got Married. I don't know if you remember that movie, but there's a whole point where
there's a wonderful movie.
I love that movie
so much.
So much. And there's a guy in there who's arguing with his professor about Hemingway. And he's like, oh, Hemingway's just macho. This guy thinks he's really hip and cool. And to say, and it's like, how can you read this and then think that? Because it's in praise of surviving and the human spirit And it's in praise of, like, what does he say? Like, a man can be defeated but not destroyed. That, fighting is the important part.
Exactly. Yes. And and I have to say, like, is it the beatnik that is
yes,
talking
yes,
about, like,
yes.
the beatnik, she goes on the motorcycle.
Yes.
And I must say, like, in my youth, I'm sure I had a period where I thought that about Hemingway, but you're right. Like, reading it now, what I feel is that what I see in his writing is a man who feels, for all his bravado and excuse me, and the bullfighting and the war and all that, what I see is a man who views machismo and, that era masculinity as a trap, he feels very, very trapped by that persona, and that it is not something that reflects, the real depth of his soul and his fears and his real passions. And, it's,
why? Because we're the age now that he was when he wrote it.
Yeah.
Think about that. Yeah, we're the middle part of our lives. Like, we've been through some things, and so I really,
indeed.
And I'm much closer to the age of the old man than I am the kid. When I first read it. So, but also, like,
he's even younger than my kids.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah.
Right. So So we're just looking at it in different ways. But I found it, like, when you're young, you're just like, oh, that's it. That's just the story and the symbolism and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then,
he's in the boat on the water with nothing happening for most of the book. And all that's happening is, like, as you do, like, he has to be constantly watching the water, watching for signs of fish, looking for birds and things like that will indicate that there's something there that he can catch. But while he's sitting there, his mind is drifting, and he's remembering things from his past, that kind of are as you do, they're fading in and out. And like that thing he remembers about the arm wrestling match, and
he could arm wrestle all day. He had so much energy, and he doesn't anymore, and he realizes that.
Right.
Yeah. Baseball.
And baseball. Yeah, and he talks about American baseball with the boy, and his whole relationship with the boy too is very very touching. He cares very much for the boy, but the boy really, really cares for him. Like, the boy runs all over town to get him breakfast and looks after him and checks in on him and worries about him. And it's just beautiful. And it's not at all, and again, the man is remembering, like, a time when he more embodied that macho persona. And, he doesn't feel like, I get the sense that he doesn't like, when he's, like, remembering about the arm wrestling match that he wins, he's just looking at it as like, oh, I'm different now. And wow, I really did that. Huh.
Well, because he's trying to hold back the marlin, and he doesn't have enough strength to do it all day. So he's holding onto the rope just enough to keep the marlin to the boat, and it's just numbing his hand.
It's tearing it up.
Tearing
his hand is just, my gosh.
And he's physically breaking down, and he understands that. And then when he has enough to, like, try to fight back the sharks, but he realizes it's a fool's errand. It's like, there's blood in the
unlimited
water.
Supply of sharks that are going to come. Yeah.
So the fact that he makes it back at all is the miracle, and I think that's what he gets from it. And they can see how big this marlin was, like, because the carcass is there on the boat when he drags back in. So they're like, "Ooh, wow, he is pretty good, isn't he?" Because he went way farther than anybody else. And but he also, like, he wasn't destroyed. He was defeated, but he wasn't destroyed. Mm-hmm. That was his takeaway. And I really kind of go, wow, yeah.
Excuse me. If you're reading it for the first time, and I'm sure if you had been reading it in Life magazine, there are moments where you think, as a reader, like, is he going to make it back? Like, how is he? He's just one guy in this little boat how is he going to get back to his village? This giant marlin has pulled him all the way out to sea. And then when all the sharks are coming, like this onslaught of sharks that you can't. Now we've all seen Jaws, but that audience hadn't seen Jaws yet. But still, you as a reader, you're like, oh, how is he? Oh gosh, this guy is so vulnerable in this boat in the middle of the ocean. What's he going to do?
It's a little skiff.
It's a tiny little boat. And so you're right. Like just the fact that he makes it back. And then of course, like when we talk about like the symbolism, there's this whole scene at the end where he makes it back. When he finally gets back to the fishing village, it's night. I guess this is the thing they did. I don't know enough about fishing culture to know that I was surprised that I've forgotten this part of the story. He is carrying the mast of his boat, much like a certain other figure we know carried a large piece of lumber a long way. And that guy only fell 3 times, but our fisherman falls 5 times. So he's dragging, he's with his hands all like totally wrecked, and he's dragging this giant mast, giant compared to him, not giant compared to the other boats, but quite large, a mast, even for a small boat is not small, carrying it back to his little tiny shack. He finally makes it and collapses in his bed, and
with his arms stretched out.
With his arms stretched out, yes, face down. And as he's sleeping, he's dreaming of a time which he thinks about when he's out on the water too. So we're revisiting it as a reader. He remembers this time when he was on I forget what kind of a ship he was on, and he had been in Africa, and he saw lions on the beach, which is a thing that you and I can easily look up on YouTube these days. But it is the way that Hemingway writes it is such a magical, like it's the first time when the man remembers that, it's very magical. And then when he remembers it when he's dreaming about it at the end, it's somehow even more magical. And the boy comes in and sees that he's there, and he's so protective. Like he won't let anybody disturb the fisherman. He wants to make sure he gets his rest, and he goes and gets some coffee. I mean, it's just
so sweet.
It's such a great story. It's so good.
It's wonderful. It's and like I keep saying, because I always think of him as like, the hunter and the guns and he got a rhino and he has a picture of him, and all that's upsetting to me. But when you read this, he understands and truly appreciates the lives that are all around him, and actually apologizes to the marlin, like, I'm sorry you're going through this. Like you are so majestic. You don't deserve these crappy sharks that are like coming for you. And he appreciates the birds in the sky and the turtles and the lion, everything. I mean, he just appreciates it. He sees the beauty in all of it, which is just, it's lovely. Like when you think of Hemingway and it's all this like other stuff, like you said, the macho stuff. And then here it's all heart. He's living like out loud.
It's so good. It's so good. But it also makes me, like I said, I'm reading it differently these days. All of his work, The Killers. I loved The Killers. I thought that was, that was a fun story, and that's a much earlier piece of work of his, and he's a much younger man. It's super good.
Hemingway, good.
Hemingway equals good. Having said all of that, like as I say, in terms of action and plot points, it's fisherman goes out on the ocean, waits a long time, catches fish, loses fish, comes home. That's the story. What's wonderful and moving about the story is the inner thoughts of this fisherman, which is what we have while he's on the boat. It's all about his inner thoughts. And sometimes he's speaking out loud to himself. Mm-hmm. And he's also like, oh man, look at me. I'm speaking out loud to myself, But it's not there's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of relationships going on for the bulk of the book. You have the relationship with the boy at the beginning and at the end, and while he's out on the ship, he thinks about the boy. But in terms of like action and scenes, not that much. So I don't get like what made somebody go, definitely this should be a movie.
It had to have been, I think Spencer Tracy must have been like.
Did he spearhead it? Like, what was I was trying to find like what was how did this come about? That is it, because what I get the impression is that it's just the fact that it's Hemingway.
I think so too. Look, they're always looking for material.
Winning.
Yeah, it won the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, there's going to be some interest in it, and your older actors are going to be the ones that want to play the old man. I mean, that's the key part. So yeah, you're right. And it's also, this movie is 1958, so there's only so much you can do. I mean, they filmed in they did film in Cuba and in a few other locations that are beautiful. Yeah. But there's
not enough locations for my.
Yeah. So should we transition? We'll play the TCM, My Big Crush, Ben Mankiewicz talking about.
Yeah. We explain why.
Because the trailer, normally we play the trailer at this point. This trailer has no dialogue. So it features the music of Dmitri Tiomkin. I don't know if he's still with us or not, but he's had a bunch of Academy Award nominations for his music. I know we've talked about him before on the show. So I'll put that over the end credits. So we'll play Ben Mankiewicz here. And I think it's actually a good transition just talking about this particular film.
I agree. I thought it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Welcome to TCM. Today, we're devoting our lineup 24 straight hours to one of the finest actors of all time, Spencer Tracy. It's all part of our month-long Summer Under the Stars celebration. Up next, we have a visually striking movie featuring Tracy giving essentially a solo performance from Warner Brothers in 1958. It's The Old Man and the Sea. The movie is based on a best-selling novella by Ernest Hemingway, who won a Pulitzer Prize for it. The story is simple. An elderly, impoverished Cuban fisherman has the fight of his life on his hands when he sets out to land a giant marlin. Humphrey Bogart wanted the role, so did Anthony Quinn. It finally went to Tracy, though, who had his hair whitened for the part, but the film's production was so stressful and plagued with delays that Tracy's hair eventually turned white on its own. Part of the production problem lay in the studio's decision to hire Hemingway as a technical advisor. Once aboard, Hemingway demanded the script be revised. A further problem developed when, despite several efforts, the crew just couldn't get any usable footage of a giant marlin being caught. At one point, they decided to use a mechanical marlin. It cost thousands of dollars and sank almost immediately. During all this deep-sea drama, director Fred Zinnemann left the project. He was replaced by John Sturgis, who worked with Spencer Tracy on Bad Day at Black Rock. In the end, The Old Man and the Sea showcases memorable work from three men: Tracy, cinematographer James Wong Howe, and composer Dmitri Tiomkin, all of them Oscar-nominated for their work. From 1958, with a cast that includes child actor Felipe Pazos Jr., Harry Belaver, and in a small role, Ernest Hemingway's wife, Mary. The Old Man and the Sea.
Our director is John Sturgis. The screenplay is by Peter Viertel. Spencer Tracy, Felipe Pazos as Madeleine, the little boy.
The little boy, who I think is great.
So great. Yeah. Harry Belavar as Martin, Don Diamond as the cafe proprietor, Don Blackman as the arm wrestler. There's just people coming in and out. But let's be clear, this is a Spencer Tracy movie. It's about him. I believe was born in 1900. I think he was 58 when he made this movie. People used to age a lot.
Well, he's also aged up here.
He's aged up a bit here. The description of our old man in the book is he's basically cadaverous. What is the word I want to think of? Like he's skeletal.
He's quite gaunt. Yeah.
Yes. That's not what Spencer Tracy's bringing to this.
No, but that's okay.
Which is fine.
It's fine. I think you still get the essence of that. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this movie. I really, really do. Not about Spencer Tracy. I think he is spectacular. I think his performance, And I'm saying performances because you get the old man as an old man, and you get the old man as a younger man. Mm-hmm. He's playing two different ages at least, and I think he does them both really super well. I feel like when he's which I like. Now this is the choice I like. When he's he's remembering the arm wrestling that he did as a younger man. They show the scene of him arm wrestling, and so you see a much younger looking Spencer Tracy who is arm wrestling this fellow, and you do get the sense. It does help you to understand when you look at the old man, what kind of a life he's had, and what his character was like, and how it must have evolved over time. After, as you say, we've seen some stuff, and he's lived through some things and some loss and stuff since then. Here's what my main beefs with this movie. I have a couple of them. Number one, it is really hard for me to get beyond. He so looks like he's on a dinghy in a swimming pool. It's really, you have James Wong Howe, is what I'm saying. And if James Wong Howe cannot make it work, it's not going to work. As far as I'm concerned.
We just talked about Sweet Smell of Success. Like this man,
spectacular.
Which is a spectacular movie, and it's the cinematography totally sells that film.
So good, yeah. And so he's trying everything he can possibly try to make this work, but they just didn't have the right kind of footage of marlin fishing. He sometimes is outside, but they're like when he's in the tank, he's in the, as I just said before we got on the air, he's on the Truman Show tank. It looks like that. I mean, it doesn't look like the open ocean even remotely. Like it doesn't even look like you couldn't find a harbor somewhere outside to be. It's so the clouds when he's in the tank, the clouds are painted on so they don't move. So it's so fake looking. And Spencer Tracy is acting his booty off. He is really doing it. But to me, it's just really hard to get beyond. And then the other thing that I have, the other big issue that I have with this is the thing about Hemingway. That we always, the reason we had to study him in school and as an example of how to write is because he is the king of show don't tell. And this movie, because of the nature of the story, relies a great deal. Like, I don't know, at least 40% of it is narration, and not just narration, but Spencer Tracy reading directly from the book. And the reason that I have a problem with that is because I think it would have worked better if they've gotten somebody else to do the voiceover. Because it's Spencer Tracy's voice, and we know that if anybody watching this movie would have known that it was Spencer Tracy's voice, right? He's not reading it as the character, but then he's also playing the character.
Right. And
so to me, it's too close. It's like it wants to match, but it doesn't match every time I hear it.
He remembers part of it. He was just turning. He's going to take it. What a fish. Now he has it sideways in his mouth. And he's going away with it.
As it went down, slipping lightly through the old man's fingers, he could still feel the great weight, though the pressure of his thumb and finger were almost imperceptible.
He's taken it. Now let him eat it. Eat it good now, fish. Go on, eat it. Eat it until the point of the hook goes into your heart and kills you. Then come up nice and easy and let me put the harpoon into you. Ready? Have you been long enough at table?
Now the fish was struck. A and the old man could feel that he was hooked. Now he should run with the line or jump or sound to the depths below. But nothing happened. The fish just moved away slowly, and the old man could not raise him an inch. His line was strong and made for heavy fish, and he held it until it was so taut that beads of water were jumping from it. Then the boat began to move, slowly off toward the northwest. The old man leaned back against the pull. The fish moved steadily and they traveled slowly on the calm water. The other baits were still in the water, but there was nothing to be done.
This will kill him. He can't keep this up forever.
I can't hear it and not be like, oh yeah, that's Spencer Tracy. Whereas like watching Spencer Tracy play the old man, I completely forget about Spencer Tracy. I'm just watching this old Cuban fisherman and I'm just totally in on it. And so having the narration, I feel like if they had, and I get it, like how do you get all that? But if they had gotten some other person to do the narration, I feel like it would have worked a lot better. But they rely on it so much to the point that they literally use the narration to describe, talk about show no tell, telling and not showing. The narration, it tells you exactly what you're looking at. There's a scene where Spencer Tracy, after he's come back from the marlin, he's dragged the mast of the ship up. He falls, and the narrator goes, he fell 5 times. Like, yeah, we see that, dude. We can see that. And he goes into the shack. He falls face down. He falls asleep face down on the bed, and the boy is sitting by watching him. And the narrator says, the fisherman fell asleep face down on the bed, and the boy sat there watching him. Like, we're watching exactly that. Will you shut up and let me watch the movie? It happens increasingly as the movie progresses that you're telling me I can see that.
Yeah. It's clumsy.
Shut up. Yeah. Let me watch this movie.
Yeah, it's clumsy. I get that. And it's not my favorite either. I just was in a different space when I watched it. So I was just more willing to let it do its thing.
But I think Spencer Tracy's performance is just wonderful. I really do.
Pull, hands. Hold on, legs.
I must get him alongside this time, the old man thought.
Next time I'll pull him over.
He tried it once more, and he felt himself going when he turned the fish. I will try it again, the old man promised, and he could only see well in flashes.
Fish, you're going to die anyway. You have to kill me too.
He took all his pain and what was left of his strength and his long-gone pride, and he put it against the fish's agony.
I must get him close, he thought. I mustn't try for the head. I must get the heart.
Now I have killed this fish who was my brother.
Now I must do the slave work. Get to work, old man.
That's really hard. He's sitting on a boat having thoughts. That's what your job is to sit on a boat and have thoughts.
And have your hands all run up a rope and
he really
it looks real when he
really well. It looks very real. Both the thinking and the reminiscing and the ruminating and also the action shots of it. I mean, it makes me so mad that it's so clear that he's in a stupid swimming pool because he is really acting it as though he is out on the open ocean. You know, if it had just been black behind him, I would have bought it more. If he had been doing it on a stage, I would have 100% bought it, you know. He does it super, super well. I read somewhere that Anthony Quinn had wanted to play this role in 1958. Is that when it is?
Mm-hmm.
In 1958, he had wanted the role, and then he lost it out to Spencer Tracy. I do think that Spencer Tracy, and revisiting the movie, not having seen it in a long time, the one thing that like super, super holds up is the performances in general, not just his, definitely his, but the boy is great. I love the guy who runs the bar. I love the American tourists I don't know if they're specifically American or not. The tourists at the end.
I think it was Hemingway's wife that played the tourist at the end. Yes. I mean, it looks great. And I've been to Puerto Rico. I've never been to Cuba. I would love to go because it's such a beautiful part of the world. But yeah, I mean, look, book versus movie, it's going to be the book here. I mean, it's not going to be. What did you think of the Anthony Quinn version? Because you did see some of it.
Oh, and I wanted to say I really like the score of the Spencer
Dimitri.
Tracy version.
Yeah.
It is excellent. It's a very, very good score. Okay, so I did not watch the whole thing, but I watched some of, some of the Anthony Quinn version. And it's very different. And it has challenges for the exact same reasons that the Spencer Tracy one has challenges. So they tried to solve it. He's wonderful, I will say. Like, his performance as Santiago is actually super, like, of course. Like, when I'm reading it, that's kind of who I'm imagining is like an Anthony Quinn type. So naturally, it's fabulous. The boy in that version is a little bit older, but he's still very good. When Anthony Quinn, now here's where he starts to fall apart. When Anthony Quinn remembers his younger self, it's played by his son. Oh. Who's, he's not Anthony Quinn. I'm sorry. You know, Anthony Quinn's like super good. His son's not, he's fine, but you know. And then there's, and everybody always is really kind of mean about it, but his daughter is, the fisherman also has a daughter in this version, played by Anthony Quinn's daughter.
Oh, okay. So it's a Quinn family production.
Like, do you know the name of Anthony Quinn's daughter? No, because she's not in anything else. So just to illustrate, like, the people just, when they rip apart this movie, they especially focus in on his daughter, unfortunately. Then we have, so how do you solve the problem of the fact that you have this fisherman who's out on the water for so long and he's going through all this stuff? Well, the way they decide to do it in this is to have these characters of an American writer played by Gary Cole.
Okay.
And his wife, who are like they're on vacation in that village. And so they're hanging out at that fisherman's bar. And I don't remember if Gary Cole is writing a story like this. And so they're kind of like ruminating and speculating, like, well, what would he be thinking about now? And Gary Cole's like, well, I imagine he would be thinking such and such. And so they try to kind of get around the narration by having these people, the other characters, wonder about what the guy's going through or remember things that they've heard about him and stuff like that. And it also doesn't quite get us there, you know, in the same way that the narration in the Spencer Tracy doesn't quite get us there. And so, ultimately, it's just so, except Anthony Quinn it's a spectacular performance by Anthony Quinn. It really, really is. He's super good as the fisherman.
Is he Zorba
but
the
other
Greek?
than that, what?
Is he Zorba the Greek?
Yes, and he's also the fisherman. To me is closer to the what is the name of that character? The character that he plays in La Strada, the Fellini film, where he's like the big circus like strong man. Anyway, it's good. He's good. He's good. But the movie has problems, just like this movie has some issues. The sea-going scenes are much better. They're way better.
Well, they figured it out with Jaws. You know,
by then it's the post-Jaws world now.
Yeah.
And we know what to do. And I know, and I kind of felt sorry for the Spencer Tracy, like, they really tried. Like, they really tried to do they just didn't have the technology yet.
Mm-mm.
It did not exist. But I just also think this is not the book. This is not the Hemingway book. There's not enough that goes on for a movie, I don't think. I feel. The Killers, yes, the Killers. Like, I saw all kinds of exciting stuff that you can explore there. And Hemingway. So here's, I read somewhere too that that the filmmakers were like, well, Hemingway loves this movie. And Hemingway was like, no.
No, he only liked the Killers.
So I don't know what kind of little beat, because Hemingway was hired as a consultant. I think the Mankiewicz mentions that, right, in the thing, right? So it's not like he wasn't involved. He was involved.
But there's only so much you can do. It's show business.
Of course.
Once they're on set, forget it.
But yeah, I think definitely it's a decided book. But Spencer Tracy.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I mean, underrated. We don't talk about Spencer Tracy enough. We were just saying, we don't think we've ever talked about him on this show.
No, we need to find more with him. Yeah.
No, he really is just, I forget how good he is. He's super good.
He's a great movie star.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And and I really appreciated, he's playing a Cuban fisherman. He's not like talking like this. He's not like a guy like that could kill your brother.
He's not any of that. Any accent work. I think he's playing an expat because I think he's just, which is fine. You don't need to have everybody have an accent. I mean, it's.
But the boy too. The boy also is not made to do like a thick, try to attempt a Cuban act. None of the Cubans in the movie are like laying on thick with the
like a Ricky Ricardo.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, that was his real accent.
Yes. But my friends said, and you could tell me because you're a Spanish speaker, they say that Cuban is very difficult to understand.
It's just, I've heard that, but I personally have always found it rather easy to understand. But it is very different than, if you live in California, you're used to hearing Mexican American accent. Cuban they speak much faster than we do. It's different. But I like that they were really kind of kept a light touch on that part of it while also telling us we're in Cuba. So I like that. I think that was handled surprisingly well, better than I remembered it, actually. And so because of that, like the authenticity of his performance, actually all of them, that it comes through a lot better than I think it would have otherwise. So there are a lot of things that I admired about the movie, but a couple of just like really big things I just think it was just, the material is not the kind of material. I'm so sorry about my dog is going bananas.
I can't hear.
Oh, good. But I think that, I think it's just like, this is just a book that maybe we don't need to have a movie of this book.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but I think you should see this movie. If you really like this material, I think you should check it out, especially if you've never seen a Spencer Tracy movie. I think it's really well done.
For him alone, it's worth seeing, without a doubt. Yeah, it is. I mean, I can't rave enough about him in this role. It's so good. It's so good. And it's just him.
Yep.
It's him on a boat in a swimming pool. And I'm in spite of all of that, he's riveting.
Okay, so
let's talk about what's happening next.
So what's happening next, we're going back and forth because we have a couple of ideas that we'd like to cover for December. We may or may not take off next week. Next week here in America, it's Thanksgiving. So lots of people are gone from starting Monday afternoon. Everybody just disappears. But for the holidays for December, we're going to cover Bell Book and Candle, and we're going to cover Miracle on 34th Street, which is based on a book. Yay! So we're figuring out when to put those together. Those are two definite ones for us. If you have other suggestions, especially if it's on the lighter side, reading wise, that would be amazing. But, there's sometimes Christmas carols that become movies and we haven't thought about them yet. That could be amazing. I'm looking for Gift of the Magi. If there's a movie we could do with that, please send us your suggestions, being my point. All those places I mentioned at the top of the show. And once again, our email is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all of my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You could find me at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok. I put a couple of scenes there. Also on Instagram, I'm at Brooklyn Fit Chick. On Twitter, I'm Brooklyn Margot. Blue Sky, Brooklyn Margot. Threads, Brooklyn Fit Chick. And my site is brooklynfitchick.com. All right, everybody. We're going to close with a little bit of Charlton Heston reading The Old Man and the Sea, which is, I think, another spectacular version, just to hear it. And we'll be back soon with a new episode.
That afternoon there was a party of tourists at the terrace, and looking down on the water among the empty beer cans and dead barracudas, a woman saw a great long white spine with a huge tail at the end that lifted and swung with the tide while the east wind blew a heavy, steady sea outside the entrance to the harbor. "What's that?" she asked a waiter, and pointed to the long backbone of the great fish that was now just garbage waiting to go out with the tide. "Tiburon," the waiter said. "A shark." He was meaning to explain what had happened. "I didn't know sharks had such handsome, beautifully formed tails." "I didn't either," her male companion said. Up the road in his shack, the old man was sleeping again. He was still sleeping on his face, and the boy was sitting by him, watching him. The old man was dreaming about the lions.
Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book versus Movie Podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media, and Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thanks so much again for checking out our show, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.